What's up, y'all? It's GC Kinsey, here to share some insight on what it's like to swim as a trans person, what kinds of barriers trans swimmers face, and what we can do to make swimming a better experience for the trans community. Swimming is my favorite form of exercise, and really just one of my favorite things to do in general, and it has been since I was a very tiny child. But as much as I love it, I also have to acknowledge that swimming can be a bit of a loaded activity for trans people. We face all kinds of challenges around it, from finding gender-affirming swimwear, to staying safe in changing rooms, to dealing with gender-based divisions and rules in competitive swimming. So I want to talk about my own experiences as a non-binary trans swimmer, why I still love swimming even though being trans can make it difficult, and what kinds of things can help trans people get past those barriers we face to swimming so that we can all enjoy it. I'd like to dive in, pun intended, with a bit of background on how much of a role swimming has played throughout my life. I learned how to swim as a little kid and went swimming regularly every summer. I expanded that to year-round swimming when I started competing on my local YMCA swim team at age 9. I continued competing on my high school swim team all the way through my senior year at age 18. And after that, I kept swimming for exercise, as time allowed all through college, and then much more regularly as a working adult. As of right now, my typical swim schedule is 5 swims per week, with 3 days dedicated to kick and pull drills and 2 days dedicated to timed 1-mile swims. I've been particularly focused on distance swimming since 2017, and since then I've brought my average time for a mile down from over an hour to around 43 minutes, with a personal best of 41 minutes and 13 seconds in 2022. I also love body surfing, and I'm fortunate enough to live only a couple of hours out from the coast, so I can do that on a semi-regular basis as well. I try to get down to the beach twice every summer, or more if I can swing it, to catch those sweet, sweet waves. Most of my history of swimming predates my transition, which I began in 2017 at the age of 29, and I think that's a big part of why I could never give up swimming, even if swimming while trans can be awkward sometimes. I've been swimming literally all my life, so the thought of not doing it anymore just because of my transition is unfathomable to me. In fact, I was forced to stop doing it for most of 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it was one of the most miserable times of my life, because I realized during the first couple of years of my transition that swimming was an excellent way to counteract dysphoria. I struggle in particular with social dysphoria. Being misgendered by almost every stranger I interact with hurts on a level so deep that it's hard to describe and honestly makes me want to claw my own skin off. But when I swim, it's like all the stress that dysphoria has built up inside me just melts away, and it's such a huge relief. Swimming helps with body dysphoria as well. Social dysphoria is still the bigger struggle for me, but I have a really hard time living in my body when there are certain parts of it that don't feel like they belong to me. So I avoid mirrors from the neck down and have to disassociate from my body a lot just to get through the day. But when my body is in the water, I don't have to do that. I can feel fully present in it and at home in it in a way that makes it feel like mine again. And that is an immensely powerful feeling. So I got into this routine where I knew I could get through my dysphoria, whether it was physical or social, because I had my regular swim workouts to look forward to. And to have that taken away by the pandemic, to not be able to swim indoors safely for a year, was soul-crushing. When I finally was able to get back in the water in 2021 after being vaccinated, I was so happy after that first workout that I literally cried. And since then, I have been grateful like never before for every chance I have to get in that pool. That is something I will never take for granted ever again. So that's why I swim. It counteracts dysphoria, relieves stress, lets me be at home in my body, and brings me a sense of inner peace like nothing else in the world. It doesn't matter whether I'm doing a strenuous workout that pushes my body to its limits or just relaxing and having fun in the water. It feels like magic every time. I want other trans and non-binary people who also love swimming to be able to feel that magic too, whenever they want. But unfortunately, like I said in the beginning, that's not so easy because of the barriers to swimming that most of us face. So I want to talk about 3 of the biggest ones and what we can do to try to overcome them. Barrier number 1, gender-affirming swimwear. One of the biggest challenges trans swimmers face is finding swimwear that works for us, and that's difficult for multiple reasons. There's this sort of unspoken expectation that swimming involves showing skin, and a lot of swimwear is designed with that in mind. Sure, you've got a range of options from bikinis to full suits, but even those tend to show more skin than the average clothing you would wear anywhere else out in public. And no matter how much skin your swimsuit covers, it still generally does nothing to hide the shape of your body. So if you're dysphoric about your body, or your body doesn't meet society's expectations for what people of your gender should look like, it can be difficult, if not impossible, to feel fully comfortable in a swimsuit. And that's true no matter where you are in your journey. Pre-transition, mid-transition, or post-transition, closeted, out, or stealth, or anywhere in between. On top of that, swimwear is one of the most heavily gendered items of clothing that exists, and that can pose a real challenge to trans and non-binary people who may be looking to wear something more androgynous. While unisex swimwear does exist, options are limited. The vast majority of swimsuits are either men's or women's. And even if you do find a unisex swimsuit you like, there's this unfortunate thing that happens where people around you will still perceive it as a gendered suit and gender you accordingly, based not on the design of the swimsuit itself, but on how your body fills it out, which can send any dysphoria you have about your body through the roof. 2 other things that are worth mentioning about that. Swimsuits cling to your body differently when they're dry versus after you've gotten them wet, so having to get out of the water and walk around in front of others in a wet swimsuit can be an extra big source of dysphoria. And if you're both trans and plus size, your body dysphoria can get magnified to unbearable levels in a swimsuit. Fat distribution is unfortunately something that society views as a gendered trait, and society is incredibly fat-phobic in addition to being incredibly transphobic. So all of these challenges can make it difficult for trans people to find a swimsuit that we feel even marginally okay in. But the good news is that there are some solutions. If you're looking for looser fitting options, there are swim trunks, board shorts, rash guards, swim skirts, wraps, and cover-ups. These all offer some swim-appropriate ways to layer and drape fabrics on your body in a similar way that you would with regular clothing. Of course, that's great for a casual day at the pool or the beach, but looser, layered swimwear might not work so well if you swim for exercise and need a more tightly fitted suit. However, there are gender-affirming options for that as well. If you don't want to show the same amount of skin that a traditional racing suit shows, you can look at options designed for modesty, which include higher backs, longer legs, and sometimes even sleeves. And if you don't want a gendered racing suit, you can look up unisex options. Like I mentioned earlier, they are limited and unfortunately often expensive, but they are out there, and I've listed a few examples in the description. If you want alternatives to swimsuits altogether that offer fuller coverage, a gender-neutral aesthetic, and a tight fit, you can look into dive skins. These are fitted, full-length zip-up bodysuits that are typically worn under a wetsuit for scuba diving, though they can be worn on their own for snorkeling, surfing, or swimming. They're usually branded as unisex, and they're what I swim in. I have some that I've kept at full length for sun protection when swimming outdoors, and others like this one, where I have shortened the legs and the sleeves for comfort while swimming indoors. Triathlon suits. These are made for running, biking, and swimming. Many of these have a unisex cut, and they tend to have more padding and structure and support, as well as more skin coverage than your average racing swimsuit. And wrestling singlets and jumpsuits. The cut of these is sort of halfway between a traditional racing swimsuit and a triathlon suit. You'll get fuller coverage on your legs, and you'll have sleeveless or short-sleeved options for your upper body. The only downside is that while these are made with stretch material, they're not designed to be worn in water, so the fabric might not last as long as your other options for swimming. There's one caveat I want to mention about unisex swimsuits and swimwear alternatives, and this is a little bit awkward to talk about, but you have to watch out for the crotch. A lot of these suits will have a seam that goes right up the crotch, which, depending on your anatomy, can give you a constant front wedgie. Not something you want to deal with while you're swimming. So to avoid that, look for a swimsuit with a gusset crotch, or just get one with a seam and wear it over underwear with a gusset crotch. Trust me, you're welcome. And finally, something else trans people can do to make ourselves more comfortable in swimwear is padding or compressing certain parts of our bodies just like we would under regular clothes. Things like binding, tucking, breast forms, bra pads, hip pads, shoulder pads, etc. Though of course you have to balance that out with safety and practicality. For example, when I bind my chest while swimming, I go up a binder size just to make sure I'm not restricting my breathing. And as much as I would love to pad out my shoulders, that would interfere with my ability to do my workouts, so I just stick to binding only. But depending on your situation, compression and padding can do a lot to help your swimsuit fit your body in a more gender-affirming way. Barrier number 2, gendered changing rooms. Public facilities such as restrooms, changing rooms, locker rooms, showers, etc. are often a huge challenge for the trans and non-binary community. Many of these spaces are gendered spaces, designated for men or women, and there may be strict rules around them that make them inaccessible or unsafe or even illegal for us to use. I have another video about how this affects me personally as a non-binary trans person who needs gender-neutral facilities, which just don't exist in a lot of places. Many trans and non-binary people avoid using gendered public facilities altogether because of the risks involved. But when it comes to swimming, that's sort of unavoidable unless you want to go home in a wet swimsuit. So changing rooms can be a real nightmare for trans swimmers. I consider myself lucky that the gym where I go swimming does have gender-neutral changing rooms. The only challenge is that there are a grand total of 2 of them in the entire building, and they're often in high demand from families who need a gender-neutral space to help their children change. So that can leave someone like me either stuck waiting for a long time for a place to change, all while standing around in a wet swimsuit, which again, dysphoria city, or giving up and driving home wet, which I absolutely do not recommend, especially in the winter. But like I said, this is the lucky situation. There are many more pools out there that don't have gender-neutral changing rooms at all. In fact, I ended up in that exact predicament last summer when my family had a pool party. I'm not out to them yet, so I couldn't ask about the changing room situation ahead of time, so I brought extra towels in case I might have to leave wet. And good thing I did, because there was not a gender-neutral changing room in sight. So how can you navigate changing room issues as a trans swimmer? Some of my tips are: scope out the situation before you go. If this is a one-time thing like a pool or a beach party, see if you can ask a friend who's going about what to expect for changing areas, or try to look up that information online. If you're thinking about joining a community pool or a gym with a pool, take a tour beforehand and see what the changing rooms are like and whether you're comfortable with the available options. It also doesn't hurt to read reviews or to email management to ask about any policies they have around trans safety and inclusion before you throw down the money for a membership. If you were already a member somewhere before you realized you were trans and they don't have gender-neutral changing rooms or trans-inclusive changing room policies, ask management if they can update things. And if not, think about whether that means you want to start looking for a new place to go swimming. See if you can find a swimming buddy to go with you and help you navigate the changing room situation more safely. And if worst comes to worst, go to the pool with your swimsuit already on underneath your clothing. That eliminates the need for a changing room before you swim if there isn't one that is safe or available for you to use. And bring extra towels and a water-resistant tracksuit that you can throw on over your swimsuit afterward in the unfortunate event that you need to leave wet. Barrier number 3. Gender-based divisions in competitive swimming. Although this video primarily focuses on swimming for fun or exercise, I would be remiss if I didn't also talk about competitive swimming, because that has recently and unfortunately become a major hot-button issue for the trans community. Swimming, just like the vast majority of competitive sports, has gender-based divisions, which are very binary, surprise surprise, and now very cis-centric as well, with a new policy from FINA on transgender participation. FINA is the international governing body for swimming and other aquatic sports, and in the summer of 2022, they put forth a new policy stating that trans athletes could only compete in men's and women's divisions at the elite level if they transitioned before the age of 12. For everyone who transitioned later, or for non-binary athletes who don't fit into the men's and women's categories altogether, FINA suggested a separate open category. And although an open category might seem like an effort at inclusion, what it actually creates is a separate but equal category for the vast majority of the trans and non-binary community. What would be much better and truly inclusive would be rethinking sports divisions altogether beyond the cis-centric gender binary, rather than tacking an extra category for us onto the existing framework. This policy change came on the heels of Leah Thomas's success as an openly transgender swimmer competing in the NCAA. And with it, Leah's hopes of competing in the Olympic trials, and the hopes of all of us who wanted to watch her succeed there, were shattered. Even though I haven't competed in years and don't plan to again, it was still heartbreaking to watch something this awful happen to my sport. It hurt to see all of the hate that Leah got just for being good at swimming while trans, to see her treated like a cheater or someone with an unfair advantage, even though she followed the NCAA's rules on trans participation to the letter. It hurt to see FINA respond to Leah's success by enacting a new policy that would prevent her and others like her from achieving that kind of success again. And it's going to keep hurting to see other sports use this as a precedent to put similar policies into place. There are a lot of trans athletes and activists out there who have explained far better than I can exactly why these kinds of policies not only hurt trans athletes, but the integrity of sport in general. The big issue, as I see it, is that we keep circling around this idea of fair competition without stopping to ask, fair for whom? It's not fair to trans, non-binary, and intersex athletes, that's for sure. What I worry about as a trans swimmer is that FINA's new policy won't just affect competitive swimming at the elite level where the rules apply, but that it will also trickle down to affect competitive swimming at every other level, even leagues where it's mostly just about camaraderie and having fun, like swim teams for kids. Gender-based divisions make it difficult enough for trans and non-binary athletes to participate in sports because of dysphoria and safety issues alone. So when you add rules that make these divisions less inclusive and more transphobic, that can have an even bigger chilling effect on trans participation. How many trans people will look at those rules and say, what's the point in competing? How many trans people will look at those rules on top of the barriers we already face, like changing rooms and swimwear, and say, what's the point of swimming at all? How many trans people who don't know how to swim will say, what's the point in learning? How many trans people will just stay out of the pool? It can feel like we're powerless in the face of rules like FINA's, especially when we also have governments enacting laws that make it difficult, if not impossible, for trans people to participate in sports. But that's why it's so important to support trans athletes, including swimmers, as much as we can. So what does that look like? FINA's rules are specific to elite level swimming, so if you have any kind of decision-making power in lower level swimming, propose policies that would protect and include trans athletes and encourage their participation, and listen to the trans athletes in your division about anything that might be missing in your policies or ways that they can be improved. If you're a trans swimmer and it's safe for you to do so, make yourself visible to other trans swimmers. Maybe through social media like I'm doing here, maybe through mentoring or giving advice to other trans swimmers, maybe through coaching, maybe through helping with policy change, whatever works best for you. Just seeing you out there might be enough to keep other trans swimmers in the water. And finally, something we can all do is keep educating ourselves and listening to trans voices about inclusion in swimming and other sports. Because the better we understand the issue, the better we can make our policies on participation going forward. Now that I've talked about some of the biggest barriers that trans swimmers face, I want to wrap up with some words of hope, in the form of an excerpt from the book Obi Is Man Enough, which is about a trans swimmer and was written by trans swimmer and activist Skylar Baylor, who you should absolutely be following on Instagram. This passage resonates with me so deeply and reflects the magic of swimming that I talked about in the beginning. The water feels infinitely safer than the pool deck. I strap my goggles on and I'm in my own world, held inside by the tight silicone cap. Sometimes I wonder why I've always felt safe in the pool, so exposed in my swimsuit, despite all the difficulty I've had with my body. But this feeling I have in the water, this is why. When I swim, the only parts of my body I can see are my hands, and that's usually only out of my peripheral vision and only if I'm watching for them. 99% of the time, when I'm swimming, I'm just swimming. I am the act of swimming itself, and that's it. I get to disappear into the movements, the water, the feelings. I don't have to be a body or a gender. I can just swim. If you're trans and you enjoy swimming, or you're interested in trying it out, I hope that you'll push past all of the barriers and challenges that people like us face and do it, because swimming is worth it. And if you're not trans, I hope you'll do all you can to be an ally to us and help make swimming safe, inclusive, and fun for everyone. And now is where I want to turn the conversation over to you. If you're a trans swimmer, what is that experience like for you? Do you face any of the barriers I've mentioned here, or maybe any other ones? What do you do to make swimming gender affirming? And for everyone, trans or not, are there any trans swimmers you admire, any resources you'd like to share, or any questions you have about all this? Drop a comment below and let's get a discussion going. You can also reach out to me on other social media. I am GC Kinsey across all platforms. And while you're here, feel free to check out some of my other videos. I have more vlogs like this one about my experiences as a queer person, along with cosplay music videos, makeup tutorials, pre and post testosterone voice recordings, and more right here on this channel. So make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss anything new. And with that, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for all of your support. I hope you learned a lot, and I will see you on the next one.